everyone, welcome to another Random Talk Sunday, and today I thought it would be interesting to discuss the importance of emotional intelligence. Now, you may or may not have heard of this term being used in any of the classes that you've taken in college. Have you ever been to college? But I remember this topic sort of being brought up, and I think it is a very interesting topic, and I think it is something that can lend itself to a lot of, I think, you know, uh, I think it's a really good stepping stone as far as, bettering your life. And I think it's just worthy information that I think people should know about because we really don't teach it as much. I mean, yeah, you get your math and your science and all that, but you don't really get this kind of an education. So I think it would be interesting to discuss sort of what emotional intelligence entails and also why I think it's very beneficial and can be really helpful to just people's lives in general, and I think is very useful. Um, Now, there are certain parts to emotional intelligence that you can um, put put into categories. For example, there's this concept of self-awareness, like you are aware of who you are, you're aware of your strengths, you're aware of your weaknesses, you have an understanding uh, on an emotional and logical level as to who you are as a person. Um, and sometimes I think people's emotions tend to get in the way of being kind of aware of who you are and what you can contribute. Um, and I think it's not so much emotional intelligence is not about regulating or really necessarily even controlling your emotions, but putting out positive energy and positive emotions and a lot of that has to do with being, kind of self-aware of who you are. Because if you're not aware of who you are, then it's very difficult to kind of, regulate or delegate how you feel um, and it also helps you understand why you felt a certain way when somebody did this or this thing happened to you. It's and a lot of that is just being aware of your surroundings and who you are as a person and your emotional responses to things, and in doing so, figuring out what can best work so that you ultimately, help people and be a positive member of society. Um, Another part of emotional intelligence is self-management, as they call it. Uh, and that is basically managing your emotions, managing your energy, your time, and putting effort into things that are ultimately going to produce positive outcomes for you. Um, and a lot of that is through emotion, through the energy that you give off, and um, sort of, again, maybe not getting as mad when something bad happens, trying to control the negative uh, things that will end up leading you to focus more on the positive, and in doing so, you're able to manage emotionally how you delegate your time and delegate the things you put effort into and things like that. So I think that's another important part of, of emotional intelligence is not only being aware of who you are and your emotions, but also learning how to manage all those things together. So that's another important thing. Empathy is another huge thing to focus on. So understanding someone on and and where they're coming from as far as emotions and feelings and thoughts are concerned, um, and all of these things, the self-awareness, the self-management, and empathy, will ultimately lead to um, positive relationships. And I think that's the most important thing as far as emotional intelligence is concerned. It's largely in part about relationships. Like if you have good emotional intelligence, if you're able to, use your emotions effectively, then you'll end up having positive relationships and you will end up feeling more fulfilled and you'll end up feeling happier, I think. Um, and again, a lot of it has to do with, socially, and this is something I think too that we don't teach kids all that often. We do not teach them social skills. We do not teach, those kinds of things. And I think it's important to teach kids and teach even adults social situations and things like that. But there's not really a huge emphasis on it. And I think had I had this kind of information given to me at a younger age, it probably would have done me a lot more use and good than having to be given to me in college and just probably one or two classes, if anything, they mentioned the term. But I think those kinds of things and teaching kids those kinds of positive uh, ideas that again will lead them to a better direction in life, I think is really what's going to amount to better quality relationships, and at the end of the day, a lot more solitude and peace among people, even people who come from different backgrounds and things like that. I mean, if we could just all like learn from each other and learn, where one another is coming from, and also use the logic, the logic is obviously important, and using logic as a means to figure out why somebody is feeling the way that they do, again, I think is what's going to lead to better means as far as relationships and work life is concerned. Because I think that's really the heart of what emotional intelligence is about. It's about helping you so that you can ultimately help out everybody else, and then everybody else ultimately gives back to you. But I say everybody in the sense of the important people that are involved in your life as the everybody. So I think that's really at the heart of this concept. It's the idea of, not getting mad or frustrated if something bad happens, but trying to find a solution and using your emotions intelligently. And that's the idea. It's not about getting rid of your emotions. It's about using it's about having the emotional understanding to put certain things in, just acting in certain ways that will ultimately benefit you. And it's a concept that we don't really, it's one we don't really bring up all too much, and it's not something that we teach kids how to do. And I think that's really important to do that. It's one of those situations where I feel that we focus too much on a grade and not so much on how they're developing as a person. And I think that's really what a thing that we should focus on, instead of just trying to teach them just drivel, like teach them things that are actually going to be something that you're actually going to use, and how those things are ultimately going to end up benefiting the person, as opposed to leading the person in a downward spiral direction. And I think a lot of it has to do with this emotional intelligence, this understanding of of who you are and how you use your means to interact with other people, and in doing so creating positive outcomes for other people as well as yourself. So I think that's really ultimately what's at the heart of this concept. And I don't think it holds any political, I don't think it has a political agenda or any kind of ideology, so to speak. It's just this idea that, you use your ideas and your thoughts and your emotions wisely. And in doing so, you will have a, a better life. That's really what it all comes down to. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say about this topic. It's fairly straightforward. I could probably link some videos down below that kind of discuss it in a very in-depth level, but I thought it would be interesting just to address it generally and how I think it just overall generally helps people, and can really create, I think, dialogue where there isn't really any dialogue, and where there's just people just yelling at each other and complaining. But yeah, I think that's really ultimately all I can say. If there are any questions, comments, or concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. But until next time, everybody.